Welcome to the Accomplished Brain podcast, where we share our passion, knowledge, and experience about the brain and health.
If you're thinking about sleep, the mechanism, you need to look at GABA being high, right? Serotonin levels to be high in the beginning, melatonin levels to be high, right? And then cortisol to be low, orexin to be low, and histamine to be low, okay? Now, so that's kind of the mechanism of now to allow you to fall asleep. So the thing is that, so what are some of the things that you could do? Well, one is if you're having sleep problems, a good thing to do possibility is to take a saliva cortisol test. And usually when you do a saliva test, they're going to look at your cortisol rhythm. Cortisol usually is high, it should be high in the morning, the rhythm, right? And low, it gets lower as the day goes on. It gets its lowest point at night. So here's the thing. A lot of times, and this is some old stuff, but I'm going to bring this up. I've always looked at memory, and the memory in the medial temporal lobe, there's an area called your hippocampus. And a lot of times the hippocampus has a huge role, not only on memory, but on modulating the cortisol rhythm. So again, another link, if you're having sleep problems, right? So then you look at and you say, okay, I have sleep problem. I have problem falling asleep. So then I look at and see, probably first thing maybe I want to look at maybe is my cortisol rhythm. Cortisol rhythm is off. Then I'm going to say, you know what? Am I having, some issues, or say someone I live with, whether it's my parents, whether it's, if you're a young kid, well, if you're an older and you have a significant other, whether it's your girlfriend or wife or whatever, and they say, or a husband or whoever it is, and you want to say, ask if, they think you're having any problems with memory, right? So there's cortisol, there's sleep, cortisol rhythm, then you're looking at memory, because the memory has a role on that cortisol rhythm, and the cortisol rhythm and the cortisol being low helps. So again, this is how everything is functional. Functional means how everything is linked together. You can't just look at one thing. You have to look at everything, and then you have to look at how everything connects together. That's the important point. Okay. So then I want to look at, there used to be a way of looking at serotonin through urine tests, but one of the things we could do is understand like what makes serotonin. So usually tryptophan, and you could get that in food. Tryptophan makes 5-HTP. 5-HTP then turns into serotonin, and there's some cofactors that help. Cofactors mean there's chemicals that help make one equation to the other. So in the case of like magnesium, iron, B vitamin, these are all things that are important in the equation to make that serotonin. So then I'd say, do I have any B vitamin issues on a lab, right? That could be something. Do I have an iron problem, right? Do I have any anemia, right? That's another thing. Now, then at night, before I go to sleep or my last meal, I could get foods like, chicken, turkey. There's a whole list of foods that, what we'll do is on our beginning of our next segment, we'll kind of put up a document of all the foods that tryptophan. But tryptophan, so you could, and that's what I'll have a lot of people do is they have problems falling asleep. We'll try to work through the mechanism and the equation, right? So the first things like I'll have is, get them to, eat certain foods that are going to have more tryptophan in them, right? Or get green leafy vegetables that have magnesium, B vitamin, get foods like spinach, in some of those green leafy vegetables that can help improve iron levels, right? So again, cortisol, right? Cortisol has to be low. You have to look at the cortisol rhythm. So you're looking at memory, hippocampus function. Then you're looking at serotonin, because serotonin is a precursor to make melatonin, right? So you gotta find out, make sure I'm making the melatonin. And then GABA, some things that we could do, foods, but there's other things that we could do with stimulation is in the vestibular system, when you're activating one ear canal, the other ear canal is being inhibited and you're using GABA. So I tend to, a lot of times at night, I'll tend, and I'll also, if you look at in neurology, there's certain nerves that will fire into the vagal parasympathetic system. And one of them is your accessory nerve, which is head and neck movement. So when I give people our software called Activator, our virtual reality software that we can move their head and neck and activate their vestibular system, we can help them on some levels that they're producing some GABA. And I'll have them do that a little bit before they go to sleep. And it'll fire into their parasympathetic system, right? Because again, the GABA has to, from the ventrolateral preoptic area in the hypothalamus, has to inhibit the orexin, which is an arousal hormone, and it has to inhibit histamine. The other thing I'm going to do is if I think that they're having some issues with, I might put them on like an antigen elimination and diet. So I might put them on diets that get them off gluten, get them off corn, get them off soy. I might have a whole list of foods because if they're reacting to certain foods, that can increase their histamine levels, right? So let's go back to this, right? One is you want to make sure that their cortisol rhythm. One, you could do saliva cortisol test. And if their rhythm is off, then you want to ask them some questions about the memory, right? So then you want to start stimulating their memory at the same time to restore their cortisol rhythm function, support their hippocampus. We have ideas that we could do we're going to probably do a whole or a couple of podcasts about memory and supporting the hippocampus and then some. But you want to think about that. So again, problems falling asleep, you're thinking about cortisol and their rhythm. Cortisol needs to be low, right? Serotonin needs to be higher to make a precursor to make melatonin, and melatonin needs to be high to dull the pineal gland. Then I have that in the hypothalamus, GABA has to be activated in the ventral lateral preoptic area to inhibit orexin, which is a hormone in that sits in the hypothalamus, but in the posterior and lateral part that inhibits the hypothalamus, okay? And when orexin is an arousal hormone to further calm the system down. Also, GABA has to inhibit in the posterior hypothalamus, histamine. So I want to make sure that histamine is inhibited. And once all those factors happen, I can now fall asleep. Okay. And again, we talked about that our podcast looks at giving you guys insights on the mechanism. We want to give, and we want to, and again, passion. We want to empower you to understand why, because it's not just hey, do you call Jeff Rose or you call Andrew Amigo? Do we have an answer? Yeah, we want you when you're going to see practitioners that you have a lot of this ability, and practitioners have this knowledge level so they could better help and serve and better help their clients. So it's two folds that we want.